inspirational guest speaker talking to us. We are so honored today to have Prof and Advocate Thuli Madonsela in our midst. As we were welcoming her into the room, she said to us, when we said welcome, she said, I am honored to be in your midst. And I said, Prof, you're challenging me, you're tempting me actually to run a contest. Who's more honored than who? But we are so blessed to have Prof Thuli in our midst. Prof Thuli Madonsela is an advocate of the High Court of South Africa. She is the Law Trust Chair in Social Justice and a law professor at the University of Stellenbosch, where she conducts and coordinates social justice research and teaches constitutional and administrative law. You know, some students are really lucky to be taught by a professor of this caliber. She is the founder of the Thuma Foundation, an independent democracy, leadership, and literacy public benefit organization, and convener of the Social M Plan, a Marshall Plan-like initiative aimed at catalyzing progress towards ending poverty and reducing inequality by 2030, in line with the National Development Plan, the NDP, and Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. Prof Thuli Madonsela is a multiple award-winning legal professional with over 50 national and global awards. I must confess, I found this to be mind-blowing. 50 national and global awards. That's who she is, and that is what she has done over her lifetime. Prof Thuli Madonsela has 8 honorary Doctor of Laws degrees, one of which was awarded by the Law School of Canada. So yes, that is the caliber of the inspirational speaker that we have today. And a lot of us came to know her when she was the Public Protector of South Africa from 2009 to 2016. She is credited with transforming the institution, that is the Public Protector Office as an institution, by enhancing its effectiveness in promoting good governance and integrity, including ethical governance and anti-corruption in state affairs. We are so fortunate today to have her to address us, especially on this theme, where we are encouraging and inspiring one another as girls to stand up for our ethics, for our morals, for our values, for what we believe in. What, you know, a role model do we have in Prof Thuli to be leading this type of thinking and to be inspiring us and sharing with us nuggets out of her life story? Prof Thuli, over to you. Oh yes, showers, blessings. Please unmute. Prof, please unmute. You are muted.
That's a statement of the year. You are muted. Unmute yourself.
Thank you. Well, thank you, Matete. Thank you, Prof Kupim. Thank you to Girls for Girls for this opportunity to join this wonderful forum of young women leaders. Firstly, I just want to thank you for having the vision to initiate this platform for our young leaders and providing the necessary support for them to grow to the level where they become the next pipeline of leaders for this country. Right. I will talk a little bit about ethics and values in decision making that have governed my own life, particularly in the last 25 years or so. And of course, if I'm going to talk about the last 25 to 30 years, you must understand that obviously it means I am quite old. Firstly, I like this leadership pipeline. It resonates with the reason I'm going to climb Kilimanjaro, because we wanted to support young women. And the idea being that your generation should not have to climb the same mountains that my generation climbed, that you should have different choices in terms of which mountains to climb and which mountains not to climb. It's the same thing that happened to us. The generations that went before us, for example, the Frenicinala generation that took the reins at the dawn of democracy made things better for me. That's why I was involved in the drafting of the Constitution and many of the things that are on my CV. But before the Frenicinala generation, there was the Charlotte Maxeke, Olive Schreiner generation, Gwamile generation that truly braved the unknown to lead. And it was a particular kind of leadership that underpinned their lives that made it possible to have an enduring legacy. My own experience in the leadership journey in mountain climbing and just life in general has shown me that for you to endure in terms of influencing and inspiring others to think and act in a particular way, you yourself have to consistently think and act in a particular way. So that's leadership, influencing and inspiring yourself and others to think and act in a particular way. Because people don't just listen to what you say, they look at what you are doing. So my life story led to me coming up with something that is called the Epic Leadership Code. I loved when you read your pledge because there's some resonance between your pledge and the Epic Leadership Code. I will talk a little bit later about the Epic Leadership Code, but I look forward to the day I will see you guys on TV, sitting on the benches as judges, sitting at the UN as leaders of the world, sitting in the various countries as leaders of our countries. And I would say the Athens Democracy Forum said in the last few days, it is high time that good people go into government. And that's the best among us go into government. Because ideally, think about it. We want companies to be run by excellent people. Why is it that when it comes to government, we don't think that those who go into government should be the best among us, the most competent among us, and the most trustworthy? Well, Plato thought so. They should also be the least selfish. So my own leadership journey, as I indicated, ended up with me formulating the Epic Leadership Code, which is a matrix for ethics and values in decision-making. I have to ask myself, is this ethical? Is it the right thing to do? Is this in line with the purpose of my power, the purpose of my life, and generally, the broader purpose of my organization, if I'm in an organization, democracy, etc. Will it contribute to the world I want to live in? The third thing I've ended up asking myself is, what's going to be the impact? Will there be resonance between where I'm going and what this decision I'm about to make generates? Because sometimes the purpose is right, but the impact is wrong. And lastly, will this be in line with my commitment to serve the whole of humanity? Which is going to lead to some ethical dilemmas. And I'm glad you've spoken about ethical dilemmas, because if you are a sisterhood, What happens when you have to investigate a sister? And I'll talk a little bit about my life story and things like that. Do you look the other way because you want to support the sister? Or you still look at what is right, ethical? What's the purpose of your decision? What's the impact of any decision you make or don't work? And lastly, are you there to save one group? Or are you there to save the whole of humanity? And this, of course, came through a very difficult crucible in my life. As you know, some of you would know that I was involved in the struggle, but it was accidental. I was a Seventh-day Adventist, no intention to harm a fly. I mean, literally, I had problems with people killing cockroaches. I would pick it up nicely and throw it outside. But I did end up in the armed struggle under apartheid. And I was a trade unionist. I was in the civic movement. I went into the early stages of government under democracy in South Africa. I was part of drafting the constitution. And in the last few years, you would know that I was in the South African Law Reform Commission. I was the public protector. And now I'm a law lecturer and chair in social justice research at Stellenbosch University, a decision I purposely made. I had better offers, so to speak, from the point of view of leading with the title VC, at least one concrete job to be a vice chancellor, one concrete job to be a dean, and then other jobs in global multilateral organizations, law firms, etc. But I thought in terms of my purpose in life, this is where I need to be. And every day I am convinced that this is exactly where I need to be. So that was difficult. At some stage, I was called a spy who walks on water, but I don't want to get to that. But these principles helped me even when we climbed Kilimanjaro last year and the ethical dilemmas that rose during that climbing process. I've already indicated that the code that I eventually came up with talks about what is ethical. Is this right, just, fair, equitable? Is this honest? Is it in line with integrity? The purpose, why am I doing this? What's the vision of, what will the outcome, what will the future look like when I've made this decision? And lastly, the impact, how will people be affected now, tomorrow, and future? And how will the environment be affected? And lastly, is this in line with my commitment to serve humanity and to save the planet that has enabled me to live here? I found that the young people that were training, we have a leadership pipeline that is fairly similar to yours. Our leadership pipeline that is training people on the EPIC leadership principles, preparing them to be development facilitators, to be entrepreneurs, and also to go into government, has really helped some young people to start reflecting where they are in their own development as leaders. One of our leaders, for example, eventually quit a political party that she was a member of because she couldn't find resonance between life in terms of the EPIC leadership code and the way her party would do things just for the convenience of the moment without looking at what would be the consequences of this in the broader ecosystem. Another one has stayed with the same party, a young man, but he still makes sure that whatever decision he makes is in line with the EPIC leadership code. Let me give you my personal life lessons from the EPIC leadership code. Let's talk about ethics, for example. Why, just quickly, why do we get ethical lapses? And I'm sure your program has spoken about that. I have concluded that it's usually either need, it starts with need and it ends with greed. Or it starts with a grievance and it ends with entanglement. Need to greed, grievance to entanglement. Let me explain to you need to greed. When I was for example, working in the Department of Justice, after my partner passed away and I bought a new car, bought a new house, and just generally needed money. But I also had a grievance in that, you know, I really did think it was time that I got elevated. And some department came with an offer to me to apply for a job as a DDG, moving from a deputy director to a deputy director general. That's 4 steps up. Need? This was a great need. It meant more money. It meant leadership with a title, etc. And I could have taken it. But here was the deal. The applications had closed. That was number one. The second problem was that they specifically told me that they want me to take this job because they want a woman to get this job. And the only woman that has applied doesn't get along with them. So you set up in a situation where you are basically being invited to displace another person. Like, you know, that story of Mordecai, that guy who dug a grave for Esther's uncle. So I was being asked to be part of that, in addition to the fact that the applications had closed. So in the short term, though, my problem, I'm a single parent, my partner is gone, my children need to stay in private schools because this would disrupt their lives. What do you do? Well, my decision was not to take it because I just knew based on my own ethical compass, this was wrong. I was raised as a Seventh-day Adventist. Just firstly is do no harm. But secondly, whatever decision you make has to be in line with your personal integrity. So in this particular case, I took that decision. But what it meant, just though from an ethical dilemma, is that I have an opportunity to make life better for my children. I decline it. The consequences are you stay in that very difficult space where you have to balance your life for livelihood purposes. But imagine if I had taken that job. When I was making those decisions against people who used to be my comrades, some of whom expected special treatment from me, and then they turned against me. They wouldn't have had to invent stories about me being CIA, which is American, Mossad, which is Israeli, MI6, which is UK, triple agent. You normally know about double agents. For me, the silly spy stories were about being a triple agent. And some of the spy story, one of the weird ones was spying against African leaders to just find out among them who hates America. Why would America be so stupid to ask a public protector in South Africa to spy in the rest of Africa to find out who hates America? There are cheaper ways and smarter ways to do that job. But again, they invented stories because they couldn't find stories. But what does it say is that when you resolve an ethical dilemma at the time that you are resolving it, be careful about the sustainability of the decision making, because we often don't want to pay the cost now, but there's always a cost. It's a question of pay now or pay later. So that's another reason there are ethical dilemmas. People don't want to pay the cost. I found that you do pay the cost. So that's ethical. Purpose. I spoke to you about climbing Mount Kilimanjaro last year, and our purpose was to climb for girls, for sanitary pads for girls, but also to contribute to the leadership of girls, for girls to know that a lot of things that look impossible are difficult, and we shouldn't confuse difficult with impossible. And therefore, when things were tough, it was purpose that drove us. When it was hard, it was purpose that made us pull through. And at some stage, I had a difficulty in that my legs started feeling as if I had borrowed them from a jellyfish, and I lost most of my vision. Well, temporarily at least, but at that stage, I didn't know I had lost it temporarily. I tried to keep rubbing my eyes which put sand on my eyes. This is on top of Kilimanjaro. We haven't summited, but we way past base camp. We're between base camp and the first summit, which is Gilman's Point. And then I can't see, my legs can't move, and I'm asked to go back to base camp, and with the possibility of summit tomorrow. And I knew that nobody would come with me tomorrow morning. Well, fortunately, the doctor realized that the eye issue had to do with a depletion of sugar, which was a mistake I had made, in that we're talking about purpose. Sometimes you have to be careful about choosing one purpose at a time. For me, I was worried that I had grown a little bit bigger and my pants were not fitting properly. So whilst everyone was telling us to pump up on carbs, I was pumping up on protein. So when we were on the mountain, I had a sugar depletion, hence the jellyfish kind of legs and the eye problem. The good story, though, is eventually the doctor figured it out, and after long negotiations, thank God, being a lawyer, I'm not going to bore you with the story about how we resolved that, but I had to use a bit of my legal skills there to negotiate. But there was an issue there, just from a leadership point of view, is know when you're not leading. We are leading from below, because on the mountain, I had to lead from below. And that's what happens with leadership. Sometimes you lead with a title, sometimes you lead from above, sometimes you lead from the side, sometimes you lead from below. And you've got to know how to influence people who are decision makers when you don't have authority over them, which I didn't have in this case. But basically, my negotiation skills was that we'll all benefit from me summiting and in the middle of adversity, and they agreed to it. So we go to, which take me to now impact consciousness. We go to Gilman's Point. I don't know how many of you know that Kilimanjaro has 3 summits. So after, when we get to Gilman's Point, one of the leader who's with me, not Sbuziso Vilani, the South African leader, but one of the guides, he says, okay, now we can go home. Remember, people don't know there are 3 summits. You can tell people that you summited, which is true, you get the certificate. But guess who would have known that I hadn't summited Uhuru? I would have known that. But I would have always felt inadequate. I've always felt like a fraud. And the girls that we're trying to teach to be authentic leaders, what story would I have told them? What story would I have been talking to you about if I'm saying, oh guys, I summited Kilimanjaro, and I pretend there aren't 3 summits? So I pleaded with them about, at least let's take it one step at a time. So we went to the next summit, and when we got there, they thought, now we should go back. At least we've done 2 summits. I negotiated for the 3rd summit, and in the end, I summited Uhuru. But it's all about impact consciousness. But just another last story about impact consciousness was when I was public protector, there was a time when, at the height of criticism against my office, and therefore it was important that we look as professional as possible. And there, a group, friends of someone, there were so many groups that call themselves a friend of someone, they come and say, I lied or perjured myself in court, because in Cape Town I said the powers of the Public Protector binding, and in Pretoria I said the powers of the Public Protector are not binding. And they literally had the whole Hawks unit investigating me for this, which was wrong. That was abuse of power. But during the conversation, one of the lawyers suggests there's no illegality if you say you changed your mind. Perjury, firstly, is a crime of lying about facts. So they were wrong about that. But the lawyers thought, okay, the short story here is you just say you changed your mind. I knew I hadn't changed my mind. But what's the ethical dilemma there? It was that we are at a time when my office is under attack, and you don't want to give them an opportunity to know that we are incompetent as well. That we're not only out to get someone, but we're incompetent. Because the truth was that I hadn't read the pleadings, the papers for Pretoria. So I had to publicly disclose that I hadn't read that, which as a professional now, you have to choose between looking good and lying to look good. and telling the truth and look bad. And that's one of the ethical dilemmas that you will often face in your life. In this case, I chose to tell the truth and look bad. But that means paying now instead of paying in the future. If I had lied, not only would I have had to carry the burden of lying and therefore erode my own self-confidence and self-esteem, my team would also have been confused because they would now know that, oh, she lies when she's in difficulty. We too should lie. These lawyers would never trust me when they see me on TV talking about something. They'll say, we remember she agreed to lie when she was with us. Is she lying now? So your credibility becomes a problem. And if you're going to go into leadership, it doesn't matter whether it's a professional leader, as a teacher, or you're going to go into the United Nations, the AU, or lead your country. What you do, watch what you do, because it has implications for how people perceive right and wrong. So you might tell people this is right, this is wrong, but people often will do what you do because that's the way of the organization. And before you know, the way of that organization is a corrupt way. The way of that organization is the way of treating people treating people badly, particularly poor people, or treating people badly if they don't look like you. Just lastly, what does it take, though, to do things consistently and to lead in a manner that influences and inspires people to opt into your arc? This is assuming you want to take people in a particular direction, which is what leadership is all about. What helps you to influence them in that direction and inspire them? Because sometimes we do things against our own will. You go into a meeting to try and influence people, they start insulting you, you insult them back. I mean, the day I was called Thuli walks on water, for example, I turned the tables on them. And then the next thing, the media was talking about us as having a go at each other, like happened with two presidents in one country, or one presidential candidate and a president a few days ago, is that you've got to be careful about your emotions. And which takes me to some of the intelligences I've discovered you need as a leader. They are 4 essential. You might need more intelligences. Others, a friend of mine from Harvard, for example, speaks about 7. But for me, the 4 that have served me, and the 4 that I have found that when I am not strong on those intelligences, I have messed up, are the following. Spiritual intelligence, particularly when I climbed Kilimanjaro, it was important to anchor myself in God. At some stage, I even knelt down and said, God, will you please help me to climb and to summit. But also as a protector, my approach was almost like Deborah in the Bible, to just simply say, God, please just give me wisdom here. I don't need more than that, just wisdom. And always asking myself, will I be able to live with it? So spiritual wisdom has carried me through. Emotional intelligence, being able to take care of your own emotions. I've told you a story about Parliament. The day I lost my temper, I also lost the battle. So it becomes important to understand your emotions, to control them, and to do meditation, walking, and everything to grow your ability to be self-aware. They called it mindfulness. But also eat. The day I lost my temper in Parliament, I hadn't eaten. And I remember Minister Pravin Gordhan asking me later if I was hungry. And I was hungry because hunger makes you angry. In Zulu and Siswati, we say, so be careful, you always have a balanced chemical system in that body of yours. Social intelligence, if you want to lead people meaningfully, make people opt into your boat, into your Noah's Ark, understand people. Don't call men, don't say men are trash. I disagree with that approach. Just partly because for me, I believe that my life has always been 4 stages of justice. Justice for me, that's the selfish part where it's egoistic, egocentric. Justice for us, where all I was concerned about was other women and other Black people. And then later, justice for all, where finally I understood that I deserve justice, people like me deserve justice, and people who are not like me also deserve justice, because as long as there's injustice somewhere, there can't be sustainable peace anyway. And I'm at a stage in my life where I believe it's not just justice for me that's important, justice for us and justice for all. It's also all for justice. And that's why we're doing the M Plan for Social Justice and the Thuma Foundation for Democracy, Leadership and Literacy, where we say for justice to prevail, we need everyone to play their part in upholding justice. And you need social skills to bring everyone on board, where you understand and people's religions. You might have a particular religious faith, like I'm a Christian with some Christian science connotations in some cases, but I believe Muslims have a right to believe in what they believe in, and all of the other religions have a right to believe in what they believe in. Mine is to share what I know to be the truth. Those who want to be persuaded to follow that truth will do so, and those who choose their own path, as long as what they do is based on love and doing no harm, then we're in the same boat. And lastly, intellectual intelligence. One thing that I like about intellectual intelligence is that it grows. You can grow all of these intelligences. Intellectual intelligence, we were told that if you're not smart by the age of 3, you'll never be smart. Now, from neuroscientists, we know that you can grow your brain through exercises, through either mental exercises or even physical exercise. Just lastly to say, for me, I have found that my leadership in the end has been about purpose-driven leadership, epic and anchored leadership based on 4 intelligences. But what was at the core of that was always sticking to what do I love, which in my case is justice. What do I have hope for? I hoped that tomorrow was going to be better than today. And then I had faith that you, me, and others can club together and deliver or co-create a better tomorrow. So these are my final lessons, is that live your life as a leader, starting with leading yourself. The battlefield of life, the main battlefield of life is the one in our heads. As Edmund Hillary said, we don't conquer the mountain out there, we conquer the mountain within us. So always act in integrity with yourself. Secondly, define yourself and your purpose in life as early as possible. And if you can reduce this into a life blueprint, for me, it helped me to have a life blueprint or a plan for life, which has helped me to measure where can I go and where I shouldn't go. Take responsibility for your life, your actions and your thoughts. Know what aboutism. No saying, oh, I did this because so and so did it. Oh, I'm going to insult people because the other people insult other people. No. You live your life according to your own values. We are accountable to ourselves. We're accountable to our creators. Fourth, accept that life is a journey with twists and turns, mountains and valleys, and it's better traveled authentically, so on your own rules, with personal integrity, but you also have to travel it with carefully chosen companions. So I like your idea of being a village and a tribe, because with the people that we climb mountains with, we call ourselves a tribe with a vibe, a village with a purpose. 5, be agile and resilient in turbulences. Never take shortcuts. My father taught me that a shortcut is the longest way. Let the epic leadership code be your GPS. You guys know about GPS. And lastly, adopt a growth mindset anchored in the 4 intelligences. What is a growth mindset? A growth mindset is a mindset that understands that you'll make mistakes, that you're going to fall, but falling is not failing, and even failing is not final. I am where I am, not because I never fell, not because I never failed, but because with each falling and each failure, I learned lessons that made me stronger for the next journey. And don't try to be successful too soon. Just know that as they say in Mulan, the movie, a flower that grows in adversity is the most beautiful and rarest of them all. Thank you.
Sure. What can we say? Pula, let it rain. Oh, Prof, you know, every word that drops out of your mouth, I just feel like hanging on it. I've listened to a number of your speeches, but I never get enough out of your life story. Thank you so much. I am so glad that we have a larger audience than the people in the room today, in the Zoom room. We have other people following the conversation through YouTube, and it is really spreading your message. And I believe that just like me, they are hanging on every word that you're saying. We have people from Botswana, from Kenya, from Zambia, from South Sudan, from Uganda, from Swaziland. And yes, Alan, we see you. We see you. We are glad you've joined. And I know that we have, you know, people from this other country, Cape Town. Is that a country? Okay. But we do have people spread all over. And we are so thankful that you've joined us. Mentees, prepare your questions. I think there is a lot that we have all learned, but this is your opportunity to ask questions. I heard that Prof loved justice very early in her life. And it means she used her information gathering years to build on her love for justice and see where she is. So this is your opportunity to use every opportunity to build on those love affairs that you have so that they can mature into big impact, like she's impacting our lives right now. But it reminds me also of a story that our Vice Chancellor and Principal shared in one of his speeches. You know that he's now Professor of Media. That's why he's always in media. Every day, if you follow him, he is right there. But he says at university, he ended up being an editor of a university student magazine. He really cherished and nourished the love for media that he had, and see where he is today. So the same with Prof. And mentees, you really have to nurture that good love, passion that you have. It will grow into something bigger than life. And that is what I see in Prof's life. It is really a life bigger than life. Thank you so much for sharing with us from your life. I'm going to check, and coordinators help me to check for hands in the participation list, but also to help me trace questions in our chat room. Do we have the first question? I don't see any at the stage. So I am waiting on you, mentees. Oh, yes, the dancing queen, Akuzo, it's your turn. Yes, raise your question.
Okay, awesome. Thank you so much, Prof Thuli. That was absolutely amazing. I just wanted to ask, you said, define yourself, your purpose as early as possible. But what happens when purpose is not clear? And is purpose stick? Or is it an ongoing discovery process?
Thank you, Akuzwe. May I respond immediately?
Yes, yes. Yes.
Thank you, Akuzwe. And that's the right question. Try as early as possible to define yourself, but it might not be possible. And also, not everyone is lucky like myself to have always been able to choose what job you would take. Because when I was younger, I could choose whatever job I had, knowing that I didn't owe any student fees for my university education, and knowing that my parents had a home, and therefore I could always have a place to sleep. And for some people, you have to take what you can find. How do you define your purpose? Personally, I have found that you define your purpose by understanding what you feel passionate about. What annoys you? What makes you jump? For example, anyway where I have worked, my team will tell you that injustice, especially the poor treatment of poor people, would be the things that really just set me off. I always have to keep myself in check because I just feel that we lower our threshold of what's acceptable in the way we treat people when the social class of that person is low. And that just sets me off. And I suppose because I grew up as working class and I knew that that's how people treated people that they believe are a lower social class. People treat people who are different from them. Foreigners, they would treat them badly, and things like that. And then there's gender, and then there's race. So I always felt very passionate about things like that. And then look at your skill set. Although you can hone your skill set, you don't have to be limited by your skills when it comes to your purpose. I think for me, it just boils down to what do you feel strongly about in life? But just lastly, to agree with you, Akuzwe, that it can be a growing journey. The people in the room, you are young girls. At some stage, for example, I wanted to be a doctor. And when June 16 happened during my time, and then you must understand that was a long time ago. When June 16, my sense of purpose changed because I started feeling that I need to work to bring about justice. So initially, I had wanted to work to bring healing because my mom, although she was uneducated, a former domestic worker, she was a midwife, she was always delivering babies.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Prof. I see Akahlulwa as the next one. Over to you.
Hi, Prof. Thank you for your speech. Dropped a lot of jewels, and thank you, Bula, to you. First of all, you discussed how you briefly mentioned that what do you have to do when you have to investigate your sister. And I would like to know how you have dealt with the impact of being an ethical leader when it comes to investigating your friends or someone who you thought was your friend or your comrade. And secondly, what book recommendations do you have for someone who wants to become a good leader?
Well, thank you, Akahlulwa. Investigating a friend, a relative, or somebody close to you is the most difficult and the most painful of things you have to do as a leader. And I must say that just generally, I'm the kind of person who has difficulty firing people or just causing people pain. So it was very tough during my days. Let's take, for example, my experiences that I had as pub protector. One of the cases I had to investigate was the IEC. The head of that institution had been a friend for over years and somebody I respected and somebody I still respect. And I remember that we always were thorough in the work we did and we always worked as a team. But given the stakes here, given the fact that I had different expectations from the person concerned, I really went all out. And I remember us sitting in the office until 7 o'clock the following morning, arguing about this. They even had to bring in the forensic investigator to show how things added up together. So you've got to firstly acknowledge that it's painful, it's unpleasant. It's unpleasant just generally to deliver bad news. I don't know. With me, that's why I'm not a policeman and I value them and I think it's a great job. I'm not a prosecutor and I think it's a great job, but it's unpleasant to bring unpleasant news to people. But you have to look at purpose. That's how I ended up with the EPIC code, that you have to just make sure that you're doing the right thing. And right in this case is ethics being a framework of values and principles for determining right and wrong. So is it right because, is it an honest thing to do? Is it a fair thing to do? Is it a just thing to do? Is it an equitable thing to do? So those are some of the ethical considerations. Is it a peace-building thing to do? And what also helped me was transparency. The team, for example, as a pub protector, knew that we had one formula and one formula only, and we can't change it. We can't chop and change. What happened? Which is a factual inquiry. What should have happened? Which is a legal, ethical, and administration and good governance inquiry. So we'll look at, in terms of the rules, what should have happened. And then thirdly, is there a discrepancy between what happened and what should have happened in accordance with the rules? And if there's a discrepancy, can it be explained? Because it doesn't mean if there's a discrepancy, then people have to be punished. It could be they dropped the ball, but the circumstances were such that they couldn't do anything else but drop the ball. And then if there's no valid explanation for the discrepancy between what should have happened and what happened, then we look at, was anybody harmed by this process? So it could be the whole nation was harmed because it lost money. The whole nation was harmed because money was stolen. Or a single person was harmed because justice failed them, or they were discriminated or something like that. And then lastly, how do we place whoever was harmed by this wrong decision as close as possible to where they would have been? So consistency helps you, because then you know that everyone knows that you don't chop and change the rules. But lastly, Agahlulwa, when you have an ethical dilemma, choose the decision that will make you sleep well at night. And a decision that will make you like the person you look at the mirror. Lastly, how do you communicate to the next person? For example, when I did the ICEC matter, the colleague, because she expected differently from me, she came to our meeting, rubbished me in front of my staff, screamed at me. I didn't scream. I just patiently explained what was happening. She went into the media, did the same thing. I just stayed. So don't be thrown into tit for tat. Just explain yourself. Understand that when people are sad, when people are afraid, they're going to lash out. That doesn't define them. That's just the moment. They're caught in that moment of giving in to fear.
Well, thank you. Mapula, it's your chance.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Good morning, Prof. I have a question, and it's with regards to the Clicks Tresemme issue with the EFF. You expressed on Twitter that the EFF got it wrong. So I would like to know, what are your ideas and thoughts on how an ethical leader would have handled the situation? Thank you.
That's a nice one, Mapula, because you are saying how an ethical leader would have handled it. Perhaps I would deduce that maybe you question whether my choice in this particular case was ethical. I still believe that the EFF could have done it differently. Again, my rubric for making this decision is the EPIC leadership code. Is do unto others as you would like to be done to you, but also do unto others as you would like the world to be. Some people say it's okay to use violence because discrimination is violent against us. And that applies to some women, for example, that say it's okay to call men trash because currently women are under attack from men. My view is, if you want to solve the darkness, you don't bring greater darkness to the situation. You light a candle. And therefore, I think this matter could have been negotiated with Clicks, and the same outcome could have been reached, or in the failure of that outcome, in the failure of negotiations, then you could opt differently, because it wasn't a matter of life and death. Remember, it was her. It wasn't George Floyd who had just been killed. It was her. So it didn't have to be resolved within 48 hours. But I think when the dust has settled, you will also all know that because women were pushed by the side and colored people who were the ones attacked were pushed by the side, we got that whole advert issue. When white people define their hair as fine and flat, they don't mean it's good hair. Remember that whole mass era was about, it was said white hair is fine and flat and normal, and then black hair is dry and damaged. So the actual original picture doesn't have African people like me and you. It is a colored picture, which is damaged and dry, and then fine on the other side, and a white blonde woman who is fine and flat on the wrong side and normal on the other side. Why I called this, for me, unconscious bias was that if you have the white woman's hair blonde, fine and flat somewhere, and then later normal when it's been treated by tresemme all by itself, it's fine. But if you bring these pictures together and give you a composite picture, and then you for whatever, you move the final colored woman's picture, you now have the dry and damaged, and the fine and flat on the left side, which is the before pictures, and then the after only has the white blonde woman. It gives the impression that black hair only translates into normal when it becomes white and blonde. So that's why my approach was that this was an unconscious bias, because they didn't realize that when you put these pictures together, it would be offensive. You and me, we know we go to the salons every time and we talk about hair being dry and damaged. And then you still get proper black hair, kinky hair that is properly processed. And these days, most people, my hair under this is normal hair, and it is, but you still treat it for dryness and damage. So how should the EFF have handled it? Negotiate, which is, I think this is what this program has taught you. Negotiate, because you asked me, what books should you read? I would recommend to you 3 books. One, Jesus CEO, not because you're Christians. It's just a book about using Jesus's principles to build followership, to replicate yourself as a leader, and to have a sustainable legacy. So that's what Jesus CEO is about. So it treats Jesus as a CEO, and don't be offended if you're Muslim, Judaism, etc. It's not a Christian book. It's written by Laurie Beth Jones, and I read it earlier. It also tells you about when do you use your masculine side of things. When do you become femme, decisive, and say no? And when do you become, use your ethic of care, persuasion, etc.? Because there will be those decisions where you are going to say the buck stops here. And there's no 2 ways about it. And that's Jesus's style of leadership. The other book that I would suggest that you take is Who Moved My Cheese? Because it's just a book about people are always going to move your cheese, and you've got to dance with change. They say, I believe that life belongs to those who dance with change without losing sight of their purpose, vision, and values. And Who Moved My Cheese is about that. Finding your purpose, sticking to the outcomes that you want, whilst being flexible about the strategies of going forward. The last one, which is the EFF one, which I would recommend to the EFF, is The Art of War by Sun Tzu or Lao Tzu. And if you understand leaders like Gwamile of Swaziland, Queen Zinga of Angola, Shaka Zulu, and I think Genghis Khan, and Alexander the Great, those are leaders that would show you that if you can win a war without firing a single bullet, please do that, because nobody wins when you fire a bullet. Your own people, I mean, if you say you win the war, for example, let's say you were going to fight, you win the war, you had 1,000 people and you're coming back with only 300 people and 700 are dead. That's not really a win, because you've sacrificed a lot. So if you can win without using too much of your social capital, then do so. And I hope this is something that you will use throughout your leadership. Don't shoot, don't scream, don't fire unless it's absolutely necessary, so that when you raise your voice, or although they say actually it's the rain that grows flowers, it's not thunder, but there may be times when you have to be firm in talking, and do so really so that it is effective.
Thank you, Prof. Our time is running out, but I am going to indulge all of you and provide Alexandra and Hilary opportunities as the last two hands that are raised. So Alexandra first, please go on.
Can you hear me?
Yes, just raise your voice.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to ask, sometimes we're put into inevitable positions where we have to deal with people that have different ethics and values to us. How do we put aside our differences, and how do we find common ground to work on a problem together if there's absolutely no way that we can leave the situation? So if we have to, you know, work with people that have different ethics and values to us.
Wonderful. Should I answer this one quickly? Alexandra,
yes.
Thank you. You've already answered your question partially, is that the starting point is always to find common ground. For me, the second thing is walk in their shoes. We once did this workshop as the Thuma Foundation about in their shoes. In other words, empathy. This is where you reach stage 4, from justice for us to justice for me, justice for us. At stage 3, where it's justice for all. At stage 4, when you reach all for justice, you need to know what inspires people. To lead people, you need to know what inspires them. I'm working on the M plan for social justice. When I started, some people didn't believe in leveling the playing field. And I had to find tools like telling stories. One of the stories that I tell them is the story of playing in a Monopoly game where some people are left out of the game. The blue team is left out of the game until several rounds of Monopoly have been played, and these others have acquired property and they dominate. Then you release the pink team to join. Can you call that equality? I have found that through allegories and stories, often people shift their mindset. So it becomes extremely important to not always assume that people have bad intentions. When I was younger, I just didn't understand why people don't see the obvious. And one of the training seminars I went on and ended up with a book in my 30s was The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, where they give you a picture. I don't know if you guys have seen that book, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. You would have seen that paradigms picture where people can argue and say, there's an old woman here. And then another would say, how can you be so stupid? There's only a young woman here. So you could really argue until you turn blue. And if you use emotive language and derision and things like that, you could even end up hitting each other, only to find that actually the composite picture is bigger than what the two of you see. So I would say give people the benefit of doubt by trying to understand, seek first to understand before you can be understood. That's one of Carver's principles. And then lastly, in your communication, always begin with the end in mind. That's what Carver says. I add, stay with the end in mind throughout the process. Because it's no use in beginning with the end in mind, and then as soon as they know you, you lose sight of the end in mind. But just lastly, Alexandra, sometimes you have to quit. Sometimes you have to reach a point where you realize that with this particular team, I will not be able to persuade them otherwise in my lifetime, and go find somewhere else where your soul will be nurtured and your leadership will be impactful.
Wow, thank you. Hilary, you are the last one. Please go on and ask your question.
Okay, good morning, Prof, and good morning, everyone in the room as well. My question to you would be, have you ever felt that as a woman in any of the fields that you've worked in or any in the lines of your work, you've had to be more ethical and you've had to do more and you've had more eyes on you than maybe your male counterparts in any of your lines of work? Because I feel like that maybe because you're a woman, people are just waiting for you to maybe slip up. Have you ever maybe experienced that or had a journey with that in any way?
Thank you, Hilary. Yes, I have experienced that. Although in my case, it was mixed fortunes. Let me say that, yes, when we were in my early days, for example, in the Department of Justice, I could feel that approach that presumes that you're incompetent until you have proven yourself otherwise. As public protector, it was so weird in that because the bar was set so low for being a woman, was that anything that you did so well was celebrated beyond measure. Oh, that was my experience. I don't know whether it's because the bar for the post itself was set so low, such that everything that I did was super celebrated. However, you're right about the ethics being made higher for women. And that's not just for me. If you look at when you started G4G, Hillary Clinton is a classical example of a woman being judged with a different set of tools. When a man does this, I mean, in her case, even just sexual indiscretions of her husband were eventually attributed to her, which was, for me, the most weird of all of the ethical perversions of judging women leaders and judging male leaders. Towards the end of my term as a public protector, when a lot of people were no longer happy with me and they were trying to find reasons, I had the same difficulty when my son bumped a car, and he was still young then, and he accepted responsibility. But there was a whole lot of a campaign to try and make me responsible for this. Like, I was sleeping when this happened, but somehow I was miraculously responsible for what happened. So it had, I don't necessarily know whether it has to do with being a woman or it has to do with being a mother, but I've also seen that when you're a woman leader and your husband or boyfriend becomes involved in corruption or in indiscretion, somehow the narrative, the public narrative, draws you into that. And when a man's wife has done something, it's rare that they keep bringing the partner into the story. The other person is judged for their own indiscretions, but when you're a woman, you are brought into it. But the one thing that I'm going to say, Hilary, which has saved me, is that it's your rules that should govern your life, not their rules. And you can't say that because they are saying this, because they're doing this, I will engage them on their rules. Also, just lastly, as part of the EPIC Leadership Code, you've got to meet people where they are if you want to move them to where you want them to go. Often I've heard now that we train young women in agility and resilience in times of uncertainty, people are saying that if people are mean to you, you have to show them too, that you've got to bully them back. My only concern is if you go into a room and you say, my intention, my purpose in this room is to show them that I too can engage in a street fight, that's okay. But if your intention is to persuade them to enter into your arc and move to the destination you want, therefore play it by your rules. Always look for angles of how can I influence and inspire these people. If they're going to judge women on a higher standard of ethics, then as part of my tactical approach to this thing, I will not question this. I will do what takes me to the next level. You'll remember with, for example, the issue of my son, legally, I owed no money, but I paid 600,000 to the state of South Africa. Just because for my own ethical journey, it was important that I do this my way and in line with my own purpose in life, in line with my own leadership impact. Thank you.
Unfortunately, we have to stop here. But thank you, mentees, for asking your questions, because it gave us an opportunity of getting more pearls, more nuggets of wisdom out of Prof. Prof, we are really thankful. May it keep on raining your way so that your life can continue to shower us with this type of blessings that are full of wisdom. Listening to you makes me wiser. And I believe I'm speaking on behalf of every woman who has listened to you. Oh, but also the one man in the room. But for sure, there are many other men on YouTube who are listening. This is really wisdom. One comment in the chat room that I picked up was someone who said, if we could just have ethical leaders, you know, at your level, the type of ethical leader you are, if we had more of you, we definitely have a better world. And that is so true. Continue to inspire and instruct the rest of us to aspire towards this ethical life. You've given us enough, and we are so thankful. And we want to shower you with blessings back. Continue to educate us, and for sure this world will be better, and South Africa will be better because of you. You are an icon. We draw so much from you, and we are thankful that today we shared this space with you. We cannot express our gratitude enough. Thank you so much.